Today, we're going to talk about developing your A, B, and C race schedule. Now, I think that most people just take races and say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then their race schedule looks like a garage filled with lots of crap in it, right? I know for my first year as a triathlete, I signed up for at least 12 races and I did them. And so it was back-to-back triathlon races, sprint and Olympic tries, running events, any kind of event that I could do, I was going to do. And I didn't even think about a plan or anything like that. All I thought about was just getting it all in because I loved doing it. I just loved it. I had so much fun doing the races that I just decided to do these all. So what happened was my closet looked like this, like a junkyard. Just with lots of different things. And I wasn't really able to focus on one particular race. I wasn't able to put all of my eggs into that basket, right? So, but on the flip side, wouldn't it be nice to have a schedule that looks like this, nice and neat, nice and organized, totally organized so that you know exactly how to prep yourself and where to go with the race. All right, so the first thing, I'm looking at Jacqueline's comment. So the first thing that you need to do is look at your goal. What is it that you want to accomplish in 2022? Do you want to run your first 10K? I mean, there are some people who may be watching this who their first 10K is a huge accomplishment. Or maybe you want to do a full Ironman this year. Whatever the case, figure out what it is that you want to accomplish this year. Just letting Jody in. Okay. So once you determine what it is that you want to accomplish this year, your big goal this year, you have to think back and think about why it's important to you. Because once you know your why, it's going to help you get through the season. Especially in triathlons, you're working out all the time. You're working out, Nicole, you could be working 2-3 hours in a clip. And if you don't focus in on your why, you can't get through the training. It has to be a why. There has to be a reason why it's important to you to do this race. Why is it important to do your first marathon? Why is it important to do this half marathon? Do you want to PR this half marathon? Do you want to PR this half Ironman? Whatever it is, figure out why it is and how that's going to help you get through the season. The other thing to think about is how you're going to feel when you complete it. Every year I have a big goal in my head, and last year I did the cross-base swim, and it was a race that I wanted to swim since I started swimming. I wanted to do this race since I started swimming. This was huge for me. And when I finished it, when I was going through the training and doing, 17,000 to 20,000 yards every week, it was daunting. And I was thinking to myself, what am I going to feel like when I finish this race? How am I going to feel? And I know I'm going to feel so accomplished. I'm going to feel amazing. So think about how you're going to feel when you finish that big race of yours. And I want you to take that and focus on it. Focus on that moment. Focus on why and how you want to accomplish your goals. So for me, I would constantly visualize that finish line. I constantly see myself running up the beach and crossing over that finish line to that race, so that's the thing to focus on. A couple of you have done huge events, and just getting through it, you just feel so emotional, and it's just an amazing feeling. When I did the and somebody's asking a question, I guess, a triathlon season is a shorter window than running races. The need for schedule is much more crucial. That's that's true, and it's not true. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I think that it's really important, again, to focus on your goal and focus on why you want to accomplish a goal. All right, so let's talk about different races. So you've got an A race, a B race, and a C race. And what are all of these things anyway? An A race is a race that's most important to you. This is something that you had on your bucket list for a while and you really want to achieve it. In 2016, I wanted to run the 2016 New York City Marathon. That to me was the most important thing. So any other race besides the New York City Marathon didn't really matter. I was doing them, but it didn't matter as much. That particular race was the most important to me. Last year it was the Maggie Fisher swim. So every year I'm going to pick at least one, if not two, A races that are really, really important to me, that I'm going to try to just dig deep and achieve it. The B races aren't as important. They help you to get to that A race. So if, say, for example, you're competing in a full Ironman, and it's going to take you 15 to 17 hours to complete it. And, do you run a half Ironman to help you get to that level? Or do you run a marathon? Some people say yes, some people say no. It depends. And if that's part of your race season, that could be your B race, right? Your C races are races that really aren't important, but they're just fun and they help you get to the next level. For example, on Long Island, there's a summer run series or a winter run series, and you might sign up for that just because you want to get faster. So every time you race in these runs, you try to get faster each one. And that's your C race. All right. So now I'm going to just move you over here. Okay, here we go. So how do you go about plotting out your schedule for the year? Well, say, for example, you have a run, it's a marathon, and that marathon is in November. That would be considered your A race, if that's your A race for the season. Now, again, you can have other A races, but I would probably suggest, if you're going to do for the season, one or two max. I mean, because it's a lot of training. I know for me with the New York City Marathon, I was training 6 hours at a clip, 7 hours at a clip. I mean, it was a lot of training. So I think, you have to really focus and zone in on what you want and what's important to you. And then preferably you'll have one big goal, and then this year you might have something else, maybe a swim or a century ride or something like that. All right, so now let's look at the B races. So your A race, say, is It could be a marathon, it could be a half marathon, or an Ironman, or a 10K. Whatever it is, that's the important race for you. Everything else could be used as training or practice races. Here I say, for example, if you're doing an Ironman, and you want to do at least one half Ironman prior to that Ironman, you could do that, obviously. Or what you would do is you'd plot out a month or two prior to or after your A race to put in another race. Okay, now we got the C races. Did I talk about the B races? Yes, so that was the B races. Now this is the C races. Now these would be, you know, I wouldn't put them in 3 weeks before a major race. I would just keep them sporadically throughout the season. They could be for speed training, as we talked about. And that could be for, you know, if you're training, say, for an Ironman and you want to get a little, you know, put some speed in there, and you do a sprint triathlon, you know, that'll help you. Same thing with a marathon or a marathon. Do a couple of 5Ks to build up on your speed. And it all depends on your schedule. All right, so this is the part where we get to discuss two different people. Okay, the first person, her name is Sue, and she's been dying to compete in Big Sur. I've also been dying to compete in Big Sur. That's like one of my bucket list items. That's going to be her A race for Sue. Big Sur is in April, so her season is going to start 6 months prior to this big day. And she's going to run a marathon at Big Sur. Big Sur is hard. It's hilly. It's difficult. What would you suggest she add to the schedule, if anything, during those 6 months of training? Bill, you're on mute.
Now that, yeah, probably 2 races, a good solid 10K. And definitely a half marathon, preferably a hilly one that replicates, you know, you don't want to do the Nassau half if you're preparing for Big Sur. That's flat as a pancake, except the highway.
And how far out would you do those races? Would you do it 2 months, 3 months before?
I think no less than 6 weeks. You don't want to go inside 6 weeks. I did there's a race in Pennsylvania, Bethlehem. Runners World runs. It's a half a marathon. I did it 3 weeks. It's the hilliest course you ever see. Just imagine going up and down Harlem Hill for 13 miles. I ran that race about 4 weeks before the New York City Marathon and dropped out at mile 18 of the marathon because I just messed myself up so bad in that race. So I would give it, I wouldn't do anything strenuous for at least 6 weeks, you know, before the marathon.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Anybody else want to take a stab at this? Oh, I got a chat here. Jacqueline says hill repeats begin to taper 2 weeks prior. Absolutely. Good. Okay, now here's Sue. She's training. Okay, now let's talk about doing an Ironman, right? So you got your first Ironman, and I think Nicole will be able to definitely help here with this one. Ralph wants to do an Ironman in Lake Placid in July. He also signed up for five half Ironman events in May, June, August, and September. In addition to that, he signed up for a couple of half marathons throughout the season. Well, we know what Ralph's A race is. Can you talk about how you would plot that out in terms of his schedule? Would you tell him to not do a half Ironman, you know, right before the one in Lake Placid? I think he's got one in June. Or would you just tell him to go for it? And tell us about the B and the C races for him. I'll show you a picture of him. Here he is.
Go back to the schedule.
Okay, sure.
How far out from Lake Placid is the one in June? I forget where in July Lake Placid is.
Lake
Do you remember?
Placid is in mid-July, I believe, maybe around the 20th.
Yeah, he
June,
might be
I think he's
okay.
doing Eagle Man.
Beginning of June. Okay, that might be okay, because it sounds like it might be a good 6 weeks apart, which is about the closest I would do it. If he really wanted to do one in June, at most, I mean, it would have to be at least 4 weeks out, no closer. May, yeah, he could probably do May. It would probably be a B or C race, just to start getting tuned up for the season. And then anything after Lake Placid would be B's or C's, just things filling up your schedule. I think it's too many halves, but you could probably get away with it if you're a high volume person.
Right. This is this person's first, so.
Yeah,
Wow.
By the time August comes around, he might still be toasted. It took me a good 4 weeks after I did Louisville, which is a flat run, to have my legs feel anything like I was ready for another half marathon or half iron. So that might be too much for after.
Good. Yes, I agree. That's good. All right. So this is all right. So let's go now into into periodizations, right? So this is a little technical, but I think it applies to both runners and triathletes in that what you want to do is you want to do it training blocks. And so you're going to have different periods, right? So say your marathon is in November, right? You have your base period, your build period, your peak period, and then the race, right? So try to think of it like that, like when you're planning out, when you're plotting out, like when I do my own schedule, I will look at a calendar for the whole year and plot out my races, my A race, my B races, my C races, just to fill in, right? And now I know where my blocks are. Okay. Your biggest right now would probably be the base. This would be the base period right now. And what I would do with with myself is that during my base period, I might want to focus on a weaker sport. If you're a runner, obviously you're just going to focus on running. But, as a triathlete, I would probably focus on my bike to try to build up my bike endurance, my bike speed, my watts on my bike, to try to get that going and have a block there of bike, but sporadically putting in run and swims with that. Now, the other thing to think about when you're planning out your schedule is you have to think about how you're going to do this. You need to have at least 3-to-1 or 2-to-1. I prefer 2-to-1 because I'm getting older. So it's 2 weeks on, 1 week recovery, 2 weeks on, 1 week recovery. And during those 2 weeks, I'm building upon the weeks prior to. Most people do 3-in-1, which is 3 weeks on, 1 week recovery, right? So that's a month. So, and then it keeps going until you get to your peak period and your race period. We have a comment. Smart content about weaker sport. You are balancing the training to meet the goal. Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. Okay. Any questions so far from anybody? All makes sense, right? When I just started, I I guess if I didn't even go to this like triathlon training camp, I probably wouldn't have even thought about doing my training in blocks like this. But, if you're coached, or if you go to a triathlon training camp, or you go to a running training camp or swimming, they all talk about this. All right, so let's look at some ATPs. Now, ATP stands for Annual Training Plan. This first person on the top got his A races in July. He's got a couple of C races prior to, and then he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 B races right before his big event, and then 2 B races after his event. What do you guys think of this schedule? Think it would work? Think he should cut something? The top one.
I think some of the races before his big event might have to drop him from B's to C's. Just something, consider them training days. It might be way too much.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's a lot thrown
Yeah.
in.
If you're not willing to drop him out, then yeah, drop
Just do
him
them as
to C's.
right. Do it as a training
day.
As a training day, right? Exactly. I 100% agree. I mean, and I think with triathlon, with any endurance sport, it's really hard for us not to compete. I mean, I was in the pool yesterday and today, and somebody comes up swimming in the lane next to me. And every time I swim next to somebody in the pool, I get compelled to compete against them. It's the craziest thing, right? So the person next to me, he takes off, and I take off, and I actually kick his butt, and I'm like really happy about it. And then today, that happened yesterday, and then today I'm with another guy, and he just won't give in. He won't budge at all. And I'm really neck and neck with him, but I'm hoping that he's going to slow down, because we're so close to each other. Now, this is just a training. So can you imagine a race? I mean, how do you scale yourself back during these C and B races? I mean, you really have to dig deep on that to push yourself to scale back and not do what you would normally do on your A race. The one on the bottom is another interesting one. Okay, so this guy has 2 A races, one in September, one in the end of October, which I think that's definitely can work. He's giving himself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to recover. But he throws in a B race right in there. And he also has a B race in June. Good, bad, indifferent? You're shaking your head, Nicole.
Yeah, that the B race in between the 2 A races is probably a bad idea. What distance are these?
Okay, so
what are we talking?
The A race is an Olympic. It's a tough Olympic. The B race is a very tough Olympic. And the A race is 100-mile bike century ride.
Then that B race is just bad idea.
Bill, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that the B race is a bad idea, but there are times, so everybody's aware of the 9+1 that we have with New York Roadrunners. Sometimes you just have to go out there and do a race you don't want to do. And so sometimes I'll do like a 4-mile race. and I'll just find somebody who is so slow, that I say, hey, let's run together.
Yep.
And this way it was just a regular, but the problem is what you just said, somebody's going to look at you the wrong way and you're going to start racing him and her up Cat Hill. The next thing you know, you PR'd and then you screwed up your race. So it's always a risk when you're saying, I'm just going to go out there and have fun today.
It's very, very hard to do. We're all very competitive people, and, as much as we may not think we are, because we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't. So it's hard to scale ourselves down. All right, let's look at one more. Okay, so
Wow.
this one is, he's got his A race in July. And he slatters in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 B races and 2 C races. He's got B races back to back, like really literally back to back. B, then he has a week B, the next week he has another B. He takes off a week, he has another B, and then he takes 3 weeks off and has an A race. So this is what I'm talking about when organizing for races. Like you gotta just really look at the whole plan, right? You can't just think, oh, I'll do Disney in January. I'll do, and then 2 weeks later I'll do the Donna, and then it's like, and we do that, right? We do that, because we get excited. Something's coming up.
These are the same people you see on Facebook going, why do I always have to go to PT? Why can't I stay healthy?
It's true. It's true, and a lot of these people, they're either new to triathlon, they've never done one before, but they just like the idea and they just want to slam everything in, or they're a relatively new runner and they want to run every single race because that's what they want to do, and they can't think of running a race as as you were saying, Bill, is doing it slowly. They can't. They just go out, they do it, and they do it for their PR. All right, so that pretty much ends the presentation part, but I thought maybe we could just open it up to discussion if anybody wants a discussion.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. You said at the top that you have to remember why you wanted to do a race. And that's really funny for me right now because I think all the races on my schedule right now are ones that I had originally planned for back in 2020. I think I'm still deferred from 2020. So it's hard even to remember why did I want to do that? And I do have one in my schedule. An Olympic in August that I put in because it was the first running of the race by a local organizer that I know. I like his races, but it's like after I signed up, it's like August in DC, in swimming in that lake. It's like, why did I do that to myself?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, this year, well, because my knee injury, and I'm just getting back to running right now. I mean, and it's going very, very slow. I don't know when I'm going to be able to get really back fully, but I put off my half Ironman, as you know, and I figured I'll do it next time. But this year I really would like to do a century ride, and I looked at some of the options out there and thought, and this was another thing that a lot of us don't seem to do, but we did this during the 2020 lockdown. It was we did a festival of things, and everyone ran their own race. They did whatever they wanted, to do. And so I really thought that it would be cool to do a century ride as a do-it-yourself. Now, maybe I'm crazy because there's no tools, there's no, nobody to help you to do this. But it's something that really excites me. And, for this year, and I think it's going to help me get myself stronger for next year to, and that's the other thing that I try to look at is to, what's going to help me to get to where I want to be. I want to do an Ironman, a half Ironman. I want Nicole to be my Sherpa. I want to do this. So how can I get to that level? Well, I can't get there this year, I know, but if I do these certain things and try to meet my goals, then I can get there next year. So, that's what I guess I'd like to leave you with, that type of inspiration. Jody, Janet, any thoughts,
Jackie.
comments?
Yeah, this is Jackie. I muted myself.
Oh, hi, Jackie.
Also to think about is, for the scheduling, you have to make sure that you have the right clothing, you have the right equipment. So you might have to purchase that in advance. And that goes hand in hand with scheduling because you have to, with the seasons changing, the sports changing, you don't want to be caught where, oh, gee, my goggles broke. You have to have, a plan for the tools that you're going to use.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, yeah, I 100% agree with you. There was one race I did this is a race that Bill wants to do at some point in Miami. I don't know if you've done this already or you want to do this, but I did the Miami marathon, a half marathon at the marathon race. And I knew it was going to rain and it was off season and I found it nearly impossible to get rain gear. I had to go to Dick's. I ended up buying rain gear from Dick's in the men's department, but it wasn't really for running and it was just so hot and it was just awful. So yeah, like there are seasons when you can buy stuff and there are seasons when you can't. And, sometimes those rain gears, they come up in the spring and then you can't get them the rest of the season sometimes. So it's important. And that's a good point. Thank you, Jacqueline.
There's another issue with Miami. Unless you happen to live down there, you're training in New York on days like today. And then on race day, it's 88 degrees and hot. That's hot when you're used to it. And when you've been training, now this is a little extreme, but somebody I know bought a treadmill and trained for Miami, bought a humidifier and a space heater and turned his room that he was training at 80, 85 degrees and humid and did his long runs that way. Did very well in Miami. I don't think I would go to those lens stuff. I'd rather just walk.
The year that I went, it was freezing and cold and it rained. It was a torrential downpour the entire time. And I PR'd it, I believe, because I would just come off New York City marathon, so I was training a lot and I was able to do that, but I don't know if I would normally, I don't know if I'd be able to PR that. Anybody else have questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, well, next week, Jacqueline is the speaker. Jacqueline is going to be speaking about a marathon Jacqueline, maybe you want to just give us a sneak peek about what you're going to be talking about.
Okay, the topic I chose is the magic of the Mohawk Hudson Marathon. And it's an event held in Albany. I've always considered it to be one of the best kept secrets in this region. And there are so many reasons. It's for those who want to do Boston, it's a Boston qualifier. For those who relish the cool weather, it's cool weather. For those who want to pee on a flat course, this is one of those ideal cases. And so my presentation next week will be comparing me, Jackie, in 1991 as someone who just entered the master's age group. And I did the full marathon 1991, and then fast forward to 2021, when again I entered a new age group, and that's the compare and contrast with both races.
Great. Well, that sounds like a good one. So that's going to be at 12 noon. We have a ton more of these webinars, these peer-to-peer. If anybody would like to do a peer-to-peer, just let me know, because I mean, I think we're booked through May, but you know, there's always an opening somewhere. And great. Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and you know, I'll see you next week.
Nice job, Hillary. Thank you.
Thank you.